Alrighty, so beginning of the first split, man. How was that?
That was interesting. For me personally, at the beginning, it was a little difficult, but it started speeding up right towards the end. So I saw a whole lot more birds at the beginning of the year than I did later in the year, but as always, it usually slows down as it did this year. So, yeah.
It's very true. I mean, even for me, it was kind of, a rough start. I mean, I definitely saw more birds earlier, but it was really in that week period where the split is here in Oklahoma. I mean, that was where I found the most birds, was like, why didn't I hunt this the whole first split and then go to hunt it the second split? And it was kind of like the birds were just constantly moving, like they were being targeted every day somewhere. So one day you'd scout and there'd be 300-400 birds on a spot, and then you go to the next day and it's like, man, it's kind of rough.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely learned that the hard way because for me personally, I have private land that I can hunt, and I had this specific pond early in the year where it was absolutely loaded early in the year, and then I went back a second time and it was completely dead. So yeah, just early season scouting is very important, and just trying not to spook birds early on in the year is very important, and saving those spots for later on in the year is a really good thing. So yeah, I think early on in the year, if you can find the right spot, it's awesome, and it's something to keep in mind for next year and the years to come. But that's what I learned early on in the year.
And I think, keeping the private land, the birds feeling safe on the private land for the second split, if you can find them, and, public land everything the first split, because, I mean, we don't have a boat, so we're having to walk to everything that we're walking to, so it's a little difficult for us. But, I mean, we're still able to go out and kill birds and get the content that we need to. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, we're still getting everything that we need to be able to get out to you guys, but it's a lot more difficult. There's a lot more behind-the-scenes work. I mean, we started this, ending of the second split, and, I mean, it was so much more to the season than what we got to you guys. First split was just, I mean, it was rough. I mean,
a lot of scouting.
There were mornings we'd be leaving and, I mean, go check another spot, and boom, it was loaded. So, I mean, we found that one spot, that was just absolutely loaded the first split, and then, the second split, there was nothing there. So that's kind of how it went for us.
Yeah, the first split was sometimes a little easier, but second split, it was just like you had to get really lucky, or you had to have a spot that had never been hunted before. So I guess if you want to get into the second split, it was a lot more difficult in my opinion.
I mean, the thing is though, between splits, the birds are constantly, I mean, you're getting birds moving from way north. I mean, we're all the way down in Oklahoma. So these birds have been called at in every state. Like, they're moving down constantly. And so they've been called at and seen decoy spreads and seen everything. So sometimes, it's kind of difficult for the second split because they have been called at so many times, and they've heard the calls, they've seen the decoy spreads. So a lot of the times in the second split, we try to go with a lighter decoy spread. Early, you go with the heavy spread, all of the decoys everywhere, and trying to get, drawing attention to these new birds that are moving in. But the second split, you go with a lighter spread because they've seen it. So they see the lighter spread, and so then they'll be more attracted to it rather than, 5-6 dozen decoys where you've got everything out there. So
yeah, I definitely noticed that, especially early in the year. It's like you really didn't have to put that many decoys out. I remember one time I put 4 or 5 decoys out and I had 40 birds come in. So it's all depending on how used to these birds are to decoys and stuff, and how much they've seen. Obviously later in the year it's going to get a whole lot more difficult, and later in the year you have to get really creative with your spreads and your calling and everything like that. So it's it's just different during different times of the year. So
yeah, I mean, you said it. It's really difficult. I mean, especially like even if you got like mid-season fronts moving in, and say get a whole wave of birds. I mean, they don't know where to land, so you're trying to draw on attention, but then at the same time, you got the birds that have been there, and so they recognize that those aren't the same birds that have been in that area.
Yeah.
And so they get kind of skittish, and they'll either circle, flare, or they'll just flare right off the bat.
Which happened a lot to us, so I mean, it's just part of it. But I think one thing that we should hit on is that we had, depending on like the weather fronts and the weather that we had coming moving in, it was kind of iffy. If you're in the right spot, you're gonna have a ton of birds. Like we had one morning, everything was pretty much iced over except for one little canal or river, whatever you want to call it, and where there was flowing water, it wasn't frozen yet, and we had birds landing in our lap pretty much for the first 30 minutes. So, I mean, if you're on the right spot when the weather hits, I think you're in for a good hunt.
That's kind of what we had to do there for a couple of days, was just find the moving water, because it was like 6 degrees for, what was it, like,
Yeah,
it was,
few
it didn't get
days.
over into double digits at least for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, everything was just iced over. I mean, we had to walk across a frozen pond pretty much to get to our spot, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think if you can find that spot when the weather hits and it gets really bad, I think you'll have a lot of success. So,
And we didn't even get to early, going back to the early season, we didn't even get to, I mean, teal hunt really, because we didn't find that teal hole until later in the year, which we still pulled some teal out of there.
yeah, I mean, in our defense, we didn't really start waterfowl hunting until probably the end of November, early December, just because we were still trying to hunt deer and stuff. But, I mean, for me personally, I was trying to do a little bit of scouting during November as much as I could to find birds. But, yeah, it's, like I said, those weather fronts are something different to pay attention to, so.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one thing like you gotta understand about waterfowl hunting is it's definitely a grind. Like it's not something you can pop out and be like, yeah, let's go, because like you got to know the bird. Like you can't have just a normal pond. It's not like fishing or anything like that. Like the ponds,
Yeah, those birds are moving constantly.
they have to be in that area, because if they're not in the area, I mean, they're not going to be there.
Yeah, finding those fly zones is important too, because like if you don't have something that's like right under a fly zone, it can be really inconsistent. So it's just, you know, knowing where the birds are coming in from.
And that's the good thing with where we are at in Oklahoma is we're, I mean, a 10-minute drive from Lake Eufaula. And so that's a massive fly zone. And
Yeah,
so
massive help.
finding the fly zones from each direction, where the birds like to go and where they're going in the evenings to roost, and then where they're going back in the mornings, I mean, that's
Yeah.
really kind of what
I
we
remember,
did.
Yeah, I remember some evenings we'd go just to see where they'd roost at and just to kind of learn these birds and figure out where they're at. But like I said, there's a lot of driving around, just a lot of figuring out where birds are at and where they're roosting and where they're flying to in the morning. So one other thing was like something for me that I'd never really paid attention to before was paying attention to the wind, knowing that the birds will fly with the wind.
Very true.
When they come in, they're going to fly against the wind, just, you know, so it's easier to slow down. But it's just little stuff like that, that if you know that in the back of your head, it's a lot easier when it comes to having successful hunts. So.
And which, I mean, look at us. We started two seasons. I've waterfowl hunted for 2 seasons. That's it. So
And
I
I
mean,
started the last day of last season, so
we're,
pretty much 1 year.
we're just now getting into this, and I mean, that's one thing that you guys got to understand is like we still don't even know everything. I mean, nobody knows really anything because birds can act weird all the time, but we don't really know everything, and so that's why we're doing this, is so we can show our learning experience, you know, this year, last year, and then going into next year is going to be completely different. Like we've got a whole plan scheduled out for everything that we're going to do and our plans, and that'll be for another video later on. But right now, I mean, just the way that we're headed, like in the direction, is just, I mean, we're headed in the right way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was awesome to have this guy right next to me the whole year because, I mean, part of that learning experience is just bouncing ideas off of each other, bouncing our knowledge from one another, and it really helps if you're getting into this. I highly recommend that you find someone else to do it with, whether they're experienced or not. Just having someone else there to help you along the way is always important. So, I mean, I think from the beginning of this year to now, I've learned so much.
Absolutely.
Just away from like hunting in general, just like, you know, building that friendship and building that bond is
Yeah.
really awesome and important. So yeah, I think that's one great part about waterfowl hunting is that you can create those bonds. And I mean, obviously we didn't have just a ton of successful hunts, but I think probably our greatest memories from this year are just, you know, getting up really early in the morning and, you know, just having a good laugh, wondering why we're out there in such cold weather. But, you know, that's part of it.
You look at yourself and you're going to a public land spot and you're in the water at 4:30 in the morning, freezing cold, and you know your waders are freezing when you get out of the water, like literally frozen.
Yeah.
And so I mean, yeah, just them bonds, but also like another thing about learning the waterfowl is researching. I mean, research is huge. Like even if it's watching YouTube videos, study birds. Like I mean, get online and read about them. Like read the way they fly, read what they eat, read what they pay attention to. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it that a lot of people don't understand. That I mean, it's a lot of fun. Like once you get hooked on it, you're hooked.
Yeah, I like to say it's like 90-10. Like you do 10% hunting, but you do 90% research and preparing and just learning what you need to do in order when you're out there. So I think that's probably a big part of it is researching and making sure you have the stuff that you actually need to be successful when you're out there. But I mean, look at us. We spent a lot of time figuring stuff out along the way here. So.
And I mean, you do have to have like it's not cheap either at all. I mean, you gotta have shells, you gotta have the gun. I mean, there is inexpensive ways to do it, like cheaper decoys. I'm not saying you need like top of the line, like Avian X, you know, stuff like that. But I mean, or like the waders, like you don't need Sitka waders, you don't need that. Like I have a $120 pair of waders. And like calls, I mean, I use a $20 call and a $150 call, and I mean, the $20 call is called in just as much bird as the $150 call. Now, is the $150 call better? Yes. And I figured that out middle of the season? Yes. But, I mean, there's inexpensive ways that you can go about it, so you don't...
Yeah. Even if, I mean, you don't have the best gun, I mean, we're both using pumps, so I'm using an old Mossberg 500 that's probably, you know, 20, 30 years old, and I've put down plenty of birds with that. You don't need the best gun out there, you don't need the best waders, but even for me, is like I had used decoys at the beginning of the year that weren't painted that well, but I used those, had birds come into it, and, you know, so you don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get into this, but you just need to know what you actually need, like what your necessities are, so.
I would say starting out, you know, you need, say, at least a dozen decoys, a gun, a box of shells, and a call. So, I mean, you can get a call at Bass Pro Shops for $20. You can find a $150 to $200 gun at a local pawn shop. Box of shells, I mean, they'll range anywhere from $60 to $24. Like, I mean, it just depends on the shell you want and what size and everything else and the shot size. And then, I mean, waders too. I mean, you can look on Amazon, like...
Probably even like hip waders.
Yeah, like, I mean, you can find waders for $70, $80 on Amazon, so...
Yeah.
That's just our take on the season, what we learned, and kind of, you know, we just want to be able to share that to y'all, so...
I mean, this is always a learning experience for us, so if you have any comments, just, you know, send them to us, but we're always trying to get better, we're always trying to improve, but, I mean, I had a blast this year, a lot of learning, quite a bit of killing, schwacking some ducks, but, I mean, we had an awesome time, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So.
Like you said, I mean, the bond that you create, like, we've grown so close over just the duck season. Like, I mean, between getting up early, like you said, I mean, there were mornings we were waking up at 3 o'clock to get to the spot before other people. So, I mean, it's time consuming, but I mean, it's what it takes. And like you said, the bond, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we're always just trying to, for me personally, it's like getting up early and all that stuff, it's like, how willing are you to be successful in this? And it's like, personally, I don't like wasting time. I don't like just going out there and seeing nothing. I mean, I like the experience and stuff, but for me, it's like how willing are you? How far are you willing to walk in the morning? How early are you willing to wake up just to be successful?
Absolutely.
So that's part of it. You know, I think that's probably why we had so much success, is that we, even though we didn't know the most, we were willing to put in that work and that time to be successful. So
Yeah, and actually learn what we were doing while we were doing it.
yeah.
So thank you guys for watching. I'll leave our Instagram link in the description. And if you guys liked the video, smash that like button and give us a subscribe. And we're gonna go.
We have a big announcement in the next video, so be prepared for that.
Yes, be prepared for that announcement.
All right.
We'll catch you guys in the next video. See y'all.
Peace. All right, that was a long video.
Yeah, it was, but I mean, that's sick, bro.
I wanna ride like Kate in the way back when. Sleep next to the river.